What is it about you Southern girls? You can't make the right decisions, you tried all the wrong ones?
At least I fight for what I want.
Oh.
Welcome to Auto Body Tech Experience. I'm Jannifer Stimmel-Watkins, and I'm glad you decided to come and see my show. I'm super excited about this business. I was inspired the last time I was at the Auto Body of Texas trade show by hearing about all the different problems that we're having retaining technicians. I don't think that what we're calling a tech shortage problem is a tech shortage. I believe it's a problem retaining the technicians, and that goes a lot into the shop culture. In order for me to be able to speak about culture, I think it is important for me to tell you a little bit about me and where I come from. So I hope you enjoy this journey. If you don't want to watch this video, that's okay. That's completely up to you, but I feel like if I'm going to be advising or working as a resource in this industry, that I should let you know how I got here, why I feel so passionate about it, why it's such an important matter to me, and just see how strongly I would like to help you and the future generation get into this industry. So in this film, we are going to be talking more about me. Now, I want you to stick with me because this is a difficult topic. I love to talk about other things because I have a hard time talking about myself. So bear with me. These are going to get better over time. I'm constantly working to improve the equipment and the different settings and things like that. So if you'll go with me, you'll be amazed in a year where we've come from this point. So let's get started. Some of you may be wondering why I called this business Auto Body Tech Experience. And the reason for that is that I am autistic. And I'm hoping by telling you that up front that you see it more as an asset than a flaw. I wanted to make sure, since I am going to be broadcasting myself on this channel and having a lot of exposure, that I put that out front. As you can see, I kind of talk with my hands. I'm going to try not to do that as much, but it is just part of who I am. And I also have a hard time with eye contact. I'm even having difficulty sitting here looking at the camera. Hopefully that will get better over time also, but it is a part of who I am. So it was important for me to put that out there and just let it be known. I see it as a strength. I don't look at it as a weakness, and I wanted to make sure that I put that label on there because I think that people have the misconception that if we have something about us that makes us different in any way, it automatically has a negative view, and that's not the case at all. I actually did not know until this last year that that's why I have to focus and concentrate on things a little bit harder. Things are a little bit harder for me to come by, but once I do, I have it, and I work really hard at it. One of the great traits of being autistic is that I am a workaholic, which is why it's taken me so long to put these videos out. I finally got a break to be able to work on my house, and I really enjoyed that. I have a lot of interests, a lot. I like to be good at stuff. Because of the fact that I've had to work so hard at everything, I'm one of those people that thinks that you can't just hire everybody to do something. Why hire people when you can do something yourself? And that's really weird for me to say as somebody that's asking you to work with me. But another thing about being autistic is that it gives me a view of the world that not everybody sees. There's a lot of attention to detail. I notice a lot more details than people hope I notice sometimes, but that it really helped strengthen my ability to be able to notice things that on the vehicles before they were released back to the customer. And I gotta say, the shop didn't really have a problem with that. So yeah, there's that. And the rest of it, the tech experience, I was a technician and I'm from Texas. So yeah, I just thought that fit. Kind of corny, I know. I'm kind of bad about puns. It's a little embarrassing. Well, that's enough about that. So I just ask that you be patient with me, and I'm learning this along with all the software. I've always been tech savvy, but this has been a learning experience for me, believe me. I wanted to start with the fact that I'm very thankful for the fact that my parents instilled a strong work ethic. I've always had to work toward things that I guess sometimes come easily to other people, and that's fine. But I just really value, and it seems like something that's lost in this generation, honestly. I've been teaching college kids for the last 5 years, and it's been an adjustment for me because it's completely different than the way that I was raised. That doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It just means that we kind of have to work with them in a different way to make them appreciate and understand things sometimes. I went to a private school as a child. I come from a very strong, God-fearing Christian family, and I want to go ahead and say that out front. If it wasn't for the grace of God, I would not have the opportunity to be doing this right now. So that speaks to a big part of who I am and how my daily life is lived. I ended up here because of the fact that so much about the teaching methods had changed where I was working. It wasn't the environment that I went to work for. A lot of the style had changed. It just didn't really fit. So I went to a private school, and one of the things that I value about that, number one, is that it was a great education. I didn't get to go the same way that a lot of people get to go. My family wasn't even really considered middle class. We were lower middle class. I don't have any problem saying that. I have two very hardworking parents that taught me how to do a lot of things. They have a lot to do with that philosophy of, why would I hire somebody to do something I could do myself? So I really appreciate that. And I worked really hard to get good grades. I used to be kind of smart back then, go figure. I hope that's still the case. But I worked really hard to keep good grades so that I could get a scholarship and be able to stay in that school. And we also cleaned the school 2 nights a week. Me and another family, which was my best friend growing up, we didn't have the opportunities that others had because of what their parents did, and they were paying to go there. So I think that instilled from the very beginning to me about how you have to earn everything. You work toward it, and I don't expect anything for free ever. So yeah, I appreciate that my parents did that. And it wasn't like we see sometimes where the parent just does everything for their kid. No, I played every sport that you could play. I was making good grades. And then, yeah, my parents expected us right alongside of them, helping them clean that school so that we could earn that tuition. And I'm actually pretty grateful for that. I think that it taught me quite a bit. In about, I think it was 7th grade, I moved to public school. That was a bit of a culture shock. I kept my grades up for a little while, but it was hard because I'm from a small town and I was made fun of a lot. I'm okay with that. That gave me that tough skin to be able to withstand being in a shop as a female. One of the reasons that I have the views that I have is because at that school, like I said, there were most of the other kids, their parents could afford to put them there. So they were doctors, they were dentists, they were pharmacists, they were all these things. And my dad was a cable man for 17 years. My mom worked for a computer company. She was in administrative work. They did everything outside of work that they could to raise money. They're willing to give their shirt off their back. And so we had people that came and lived with us when their family was down on hard times. My parents would take them in, and that's another aspect that I really appreciate from them. All of these things, the reason that I'm talking about them, they come together they really formed me caring about people. And I knew that when I grew up, I wanted to do something where I helped people, but I wasn't sure what it was. It was beaten into us. That's the wrong term to use. It wasn't beaten into us. You were made to feel that if you didn't get that 4-year degree, you weren't ever going to be anything. And one of the reasons I'm doing this is because I want the students of this generation to know that does not have to be the case. It's put me in a big mess throughout my life. I actually have 4 degrees. Ask me how useful all of them are. It instilled this idea in my head that you had to have that 4-year degree to be worth it. You could not be successful without it. And that continued even when I went to public school. Our guidance counselors were pushing that 4-year school. I never heard about the tech school that I went to, ever. And it's 30 miles away. We're from a small town, and everything we do is in Waco. And it just wasn't talked about. And I think that's so unfortunate. So ever since I've gotten into this industry, I've made it a point to make sure that they know this. And when I get further in the story, you're going to see why. I kind of started slacking off on my grades when I got to high school. I did really well my freshman year, but I started working. And like I said, my parents always wanted us to contribute to the household as far as participate. You earn everything. Nothing was given to us. It sounds like I have a problem with that because I keep bringing it up, but I don't. I just feel like values like that aren't always passed down now. And especially, even my kids don't understand. I tell them all the time, you don't get how much I don't make you do. And I should, because I'm so thankful. My brother and I both work very hard. And we're both very thankful that our parents instilled that in us. So I got those jobs. I was usually working 2 or 3 jobs. When I get off from one, I go to another. My grades weren't doing that well. When I go to school the next day and I didn't have an assignment to turn in, or I didn't do well on a test, a teacher would ask me, why are you not doing what you're supposed to be doing? And I was like, oh, well, I had to work last night. Oh, is your family struggling? I was like, no, I just like being able to take care of myself. I don't believe in asking my parents for gas money to go ride around. I don't believe in asking for everything. I wanted to earn everything. And I knew it would be a hardship on them. There were already some struggles that we were having, and I didn't want to be any more of a burden. They ended up getting divorced whenever I was 15 or 16 years old. That was pretty traumatic for me because our family was a big thing, and it was, that also made it to where I didn't really care about school that much. So here I am getting to the point where I'm about to graduate. I have no idea what I'm going to do. I went to work as a bartender, and then I was a bank teller part-time during the day, and then I was a bartender at night. I got my first full-time job at Baylor doing data input. I did a lot of clerical and healthcare before I got into the collision industry. I tried to go into community college. They even let us off a little bit during the day to be able to go do that as long as we made the hours up, and I just could not get into it. Then I was like, okay, well, I'm going to go. I thought about being a fashion designer, not necessarily because I liked fashion that much. It wasn't about the clothes. It was about the fact that I had struggled with my weight, and I hated that clothes were designed for people that weighed 99 pounds and were 5'9". So I was going to do this mission to where there were more clothes available for people like me. So I applied for a job in Denton, and I moved up there at the drop of a hat. I had already gotten myself a job, a place to live. I was going to start school in the fall at Texas Women's University. And I did. And Brad couldn't go at that time. I'm married to a technician. He's an automotive technician. We started dating when we were 18. There's been some times that it was rough because it's hard to start out as a technician. You're told in school that you're just going to make all this money right off the bat. And I think we all know that's not the case. You have to work to be able to afford to be on commission and flat rate. He's now a Ford senior master technician and a shop foreman, so he did end up getting there. There were so many times he thought about giving up, and this is not what I was promised when I was in school. That's why I always tried as an educator to make sure that I was honest. However much we get paid is going to be based on what you put into it. So when I say Brad, I'm talking about my husband. He ended up coming up there, and he worked at a Ford dealership, still struggling to try to make enough hours for us to be able to support ourselves. I was working at a data entry job again. I hated it. I hated fashion design. For some reason, it did not occur to me that you actually have to sew the clothes. I really enjoyed drawing. I had always loved being an artist and drawing and things like that. I did not know I was going to have to sew, and I really hated that part of it. But it turned out anyway that I was having some health issues and I needed to have surgery, and there was no way I could afford to stay in that area and be able to pay those bills without working. So I ended up coming back home so that my mom could help take care of me during recovery. I went to work at a dealership for a little while. We ended up having our child within the next couple of months after that, almost a year to my surgery date before we had our first child. And that pretty much changed my view on everything. All those failed attempts at trying to go to school, I got to the point where I knew that I had to do something. And so with both of my children, I stayed home. The first one, I stayed home for 2 years because I think it's a part of my foundation that I wanted to be able to be home with them at least their first year. The first one, we didn't have daycare available until they were 2 years old, so I didn't have a lot of choice in it. So that's what I did. I stayed home for about a year and a half, and I started working at night as a polysomnographic technician. That's a sleep tech for any of you that haven't had a sleep study done before. It was the best pay that I had ever made because it was a technician and it was specialized, but I was at the bottom of the totem pole because I had not been there as long as everyone else, and it was a night job. It was a 12-hour night job. I worked every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday night. I missed birthdays, holidays. And it's really hard to be married and have a 2-year-old at home and not be able to be awake during the day and have to work all weekend. So I knew I had to do something, and I ended up going to McLennan Community College. I double majored in general studies, or general academics, whatever they want to call it, in arts and sciences, because I knew kind of what I wanted to do, but I wasn't sure. I wanted to specialize in healthcare so that I just wanted a career where I could make something of myself and be able to show, number one, my daughters that you can do something with your life. And number two, I wanted to be able to help contribute to the household. So I graduated with honors and scholarships from the community college. I had gone back and forth on radiology, but I wanted to be an ultrasound technician. Job prospects for that in our area, they don't need very many of those. So I went to nursing school. Again, went to UMHB. Instead of going to something affordable like McLennan Community College or to Temple College, I went to UMHB, which is a private school at the time. This was back in 2011. I want to say it was like $15,000 a semester, maybe something close to that. I was on 2 different scholarships, Pell Grants, loans. That's actually the largest part of my debt now, was going there. I went there a year and a half. It's about 70 something miles from here, and it was long hours. It was hard to keep up with family responsibilities. We had to sign a contract that we couldn't work, or there may have been a minimum amount of hours that we couldn't work. I don't remember. I just know that it made it to where I couldn't contribute. It was difficult being away from home and my family. So I did not, I think it was pharmacology, I didn't pass. I had been there a year and a half, still trying to get that 4-year degree, which is why I went there instead of, that associates just wasn't, it had been programmed into me that associates wasn't enough. It wasn't enough. So I finished there in December of 2012. Still had to get that 4-year degree. And I reapplied to Texas Women's University. They now had a lot more online courses available, so I wouldn't have to move back to Denton. That was great. I did the degree that everybody on the conservative side talks about, the sociology, the women's studies, health studies. I still was in that need to want to help people, and so I wanted to work with victim services and victims of abuse and victims of sexual assault and violence, and be able to help work in a shelter in some way, something of that form. So I graduated with honors. I was cum laude, graduated, started applying for jobs, and I worked in healthcare several times because my mom she had worked her way up to being a director of 4 rural health clinics. And I think we kind of all understand from the shops how hard it is to get somebody in there, train them, and then they leave us. Yeah, she had the same problem in healthcare. And so whenever a job would be open for a while, she'd ask me to come fill it. She actually kept me PRN so that she wouldn't have to keep going through the hiring process. I think I was PRN for like 7 years. She knew that I could come in there, and I was going to work to try to figure out what I needed to do. So I did patient assistance. At night, I was working at a women's shelter. Again, I don't know what it is with me always needing to work more than one job. I should probably look into that. Anyway, that's one of the things I'm excited about working for myself, is that I can devote as much time as I want to it. I can focus on as many different topics and keep myself busy. I like to stay really busy. I did that for about a year as I was applying for jobs that required a bachelor's degree. I had gone and gotten this bachelor's degree, and now here I was saddled with all this debt, especially, and most of it was for the private school I went to for nursing, which I was not getting the nursing pay after I graduated because I didn't stay with it. But I still had this debt, and I had to have a way to solve that. I had to have a job that I was going to be able to pay that debt back, which is a big thing on a lot of these kids. And one of the reasons that I'm so passionate about trying to help them either go for scholarships, get their college paid for by an employer, earn it somehow. When I say that I care what happens to them, it's for this very reason. I don't want them to be saddled with what I was saddled with. It was rough. And even to this day, my loans were coming due. So I went and applied for all these jobs, and then it came out this phrase: so you have the degree, what experience do you have? Well, I don't have the experience. I was going to get the degree, and I couldn't get the experience without the degree. So what am I supposed to do? They don't tell you that whenever they're trying to push you into this education. And I don't have anything against 4-year degrees. If you know exactly what it is that you want to do, and that 4-year degree is required for it, then that's fine. But there's so many degrees that people spend time going for, and they could do that job without the degree. I live in a prison town. We used to have a youth center here, and we have a women's prison. There are people with bachelor's degrees working there. A job that many of the people that I know graduated straight from high school and went into, and they're working there with bachelor's degrees, not because it's their specialty, but because they could not find anything else, and it was the only thing to be able to support their family. That speaks volumes to me, and I don't think that a lot of people understand that. And that really goes a lot into who I am and why I've made the decisions that I've made also. So I was at home with my second child. I left the clinic. I ended up training one of my friends to take that job. She did great at it, and I felt comfortable enough. I came home and I stayed with my second child. She was a surprise. I didn't know I was going to be having any more kids because of health reasons from before. But I had her, and of course I was going to stay home with her again. Just like I did the first child. That's one of my fundamentals I think is important. If you can't do that or you don't want to do that, there's no judgment in that. It was just something that was important to me. Of course, while I was at home, I wasn't just doing nothing. I was learning how to build. I built a room. I built 2 different sheds. I was ripping walls out, remodeling. We bought a house. I'm really big on budgeting. And so we bought a house the right way. We owned our land. We paid for our land, owner financed a little bit, and then paid it out. And then bought a house at a very low price, had it moved here, and I've been remodeling it for about 18 years. So, yeah, that's one of the things that's been taking up some of my time. I'm supposed to be working on these videos. But it was important for me to be able to find something. So another thing I was doing to be able to save up was I raised French Bulldogs and Great Danes. I've done a little bit of everything, guys. I really enjoyed that, but there's a lot of heartbreak in it too. And I finally got my bus that I've always wanted. I wanted it as a teenager. My dad did not want me driving a Volkswagen. He was terrified about the fact there's no engine in the front. But he's always been very protective of me ever since I was younger. And he also was a big factor in why I thought I needed that college degree. I grew up my entire life spending all my time in the shop with my dad and his friends and going over their shops and going and picking up cars with him and going to car shows with him and restoring cars. But the extent of my knowledge in it was to go get the tea, to hand him whatever tool he needed, to pump the brakes while he was working on that. And if he got tired of me asking enough questions, he would hand me a scuff pad and make me go scrub the corrosion off of one of the bicycles in the pile. So he really felt strongly that he didn't want me going into it. And it's not a machismo thing. It's more the fact that he was in labor jobs his whole life, and he didn't want that for me. He didn't want me to struggle and my body to break down the way that his had. Like I said, he was a cable man for 17 years, and it messed his knees up. He also worked for the county on the road and bridge crew. He was in maintenance at the prison. He worked for the highway department. All his jobs were very related. He also has picked up skills, and he can do anything. He can build anything, and he can fix anything. He actually lives next door, and he's restoring a 65 Impala right now. Somehow, he tries to rope me into that sometimes, but since I've been an instructor, I just teach him. What's the old phrase? If you do something for someone, if you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. If you teach a man a fish, you feed him for a lifetime. That's how I am with the collision repair and the painting. If I teach him, he can do it himself. Anyway, while I was at home with her, I had gotten this brilliant idea, since my husband was a technician, that we could go to auctions and get cars and flip them. And I was like, oh, I'll learn how to do the body. I also had that Volkswagen bus that I had gotten, which he should have let me buy as a teenager. They were $200 back then, and some of the splitties are $100,000 now. Yeah, I think he regrets that decision. I also have some intuition on trends and the way that things are going to go in the future. One thing I think would make me a good consultant. But I have a bay window. I really want a splitty. I'm going to get one day. I know that's off topic. You can see I'm a big Volkswagen fan. You can see it all behind me and stuff too. Not the newer ones, the older ones. But I started looking up how to be able to fix the outsides of the cars. That was always what I was drawn to. I was never drawn to the mechanical part of it. It was always about the style lines and the curvature, the beauty of the car, the strength of the car. It just fascinated me. I was probably the only 9-year-old girl that had a subscription to Auto Trader, Classic Car Trader, and expected my thrifty nickel every Thursday at 5:30 when my dad got home. And if he didn't have it, I was going to want to go back to town and get my thrifty nickel. I needed to look at every car that was listed. I needed to be able to see everything in the automobile section and the classic car section. I don't know if y'all remember what thrifty nickel was, or if they had it everywhere. I'm pretty sure it was nationwide when it started going online. But that, I was all into that. I could tell you any car by its tail lights by the time I was 9 years old. You know, that's what makes every 9-year-old girl want to hang out with you and play with you. I was kind of a weirdo. I'm okay with that. It paid off later. I looked into the local schools. It did not even occur to me that the tech school that was in Waco that my husband had graduated from actually had an auto collision program. I called up there. I got a tour and went for the tour, registered that day, and in 2 weeks I started school. All I wanted to do was paint my Volkswagen bus. I was kind of interested in airbrushing and like custom restoration. That kind of stayed my focus the first semester. I met a great group of friends that helped me. They really helped me get through. They had convinced me that, oh, well, let's just go to the repair side first. We'll come back and we'll do paint later. And they made that promise to me. I had two really good friends, Romero and Alcala. We lived in that school. You had to kick us out. We were trying to be there until 5 o'clock every day. We were the only ones that would ever work on the Skills USA project, even though we all competed in skills in our little group. Romero was a big part of helping me with the labs. I struggled really hard with that. I was good at the book part of it and the material. I'm fascinated by knowledge. That's why I do so well with procedures and how I got into that whenever I got into my actual collision job. I'll cover that in a second. But we had this agreement, and they would make fun of me because I was slow and everything was harder for me. My dad really made sure that it wasn't that he made sure of it. He really did not want me to do something like that. So he didn't cover the information. He freaked out when he knew I was going to be using cutting wheels and all this stuff. He was fine with me going and being a painter. He was not good with me being in collision repair. When I told him I was going from the body side to the paint side, he was not thrilled. He said, that's like a bull in a china cabinet. Another part of being autistic is that I don't have the best coordination all the time. I struggle with balance and motor coordination skills. Sometimes I drop things. I kind of fall down. I bump into stuff. But funnily enough, in collision repair, because of how interested I was in it and how focused I was whenever I was in there, I don't really have those problems. I did have one injury whenever I was an instructor. I ran into a heat lamp. I just turned around, ran right into it, and it busted my eyebrow open. That was fun to do in front of the students. But other than that, I haven't really had any incidents. And so I went ahead and got on the collision side. Because I already had 3 degrees when I went in there, I didn't need to take any of the academics. And so I was taking one of the refinishing courses for second semester along with it. Bad idea. That's a lot. It was a lot of information, a lot of work, a lot of time in lab, a lot of time in class. It got to where I dreaded going to my refinishing class. It just wasn't for me. I love all the different parts of repair, and it's always something different. It changes. You do so many different things, and with refinishing, it requires a huge amount of skill, but a lot of it seemed repetitive to me. It's not. I know there's all these different things, and it's always different colors and the way you mix them. I know there's a lot to it. It just wasn't for me. So whenever I got to the repair side, that's where I met my hero and mentor, Mr. Marshall. And he made all of the material so interesting, and it fascinated me. I loved welding, measuring, the vehicle structural analysis, the fact that we could have such thin metals and they protect us when we're going down the highway 80 miles an hour. And if we have an impact, we can survive that. That was not a thing before. And learning that, he would make sure and show us how things were and how they've evolved. And he always stayed on top of everything that was changing. And it just excited me. I also really like specifics. I'm a perfectionist, and I like exact things like measurements, procedures. Kind of nerdy, I know, but that's what interests me. And so I fell in love with collision repair. Needless to say, I finished my refinishing class, and that next semester, the third semester, I didn't do it anymore. I did struggle with the tools and everything seemed to come so naturally to Romero and Alcala. So Romero and I were in every class together, and after we would finish class, he would come in there and he would coach me and yell at me like a drill sergeant. He was a veteran. He was good at everything naturally. It was so annoying sometimes, actually. Example, we all competed in skills. Our second semester, I did the repair. Did not even place. He placed second on the refinish side, and we had not even taken any paint classes. This was the guy that talked me into not taking the paint classes and going to the repair side first. In our last semester, he actually went and got a job as a painter and was painting at that shop within the first month of working there. So, like I said, everything came naturally to him. And I can remember in aluminum welding, he was all in my ear. He was like, crank up the heat, crank up the gas. What are you so scared of? And that was a big thing. And I used to tell my students all the time that when you're in something that intensive, it's great to make friends and build those relationships with people that understand you and are going through what you're going through, because nobody in my personal life cared about it. For sure not my friends. They'd listen to me just to be kind, but nobody understands the experience you're going through like the ones that are in there with you. We went to a collision repair education foundation recruiting thing where they were showing us what kind of jobs we could get, what shops were hiring, what tools, different things like that. And we had decided that day that we were both going to go and work at collision repair shops somewhere wherever our families ended up. And then we'd come back in 5 or 10 years and we were going to be an instructor. That's how much our instructors inspired us. We wanted to be just like them. So that was our goal. We got to our last semester and he was always giving me a hard time. I didn't really notice that much. I don't know what it was. I didn't notice how off things were. He had snapped at me that first week. And he always gave me a hard time, but he never snapped at me like that. And he had actually talked to our instructor and asked our instructor if he could go work instead of coming to labs, and he'd make the labs up later. And I didn't really ask many questions. It was kind of weird that he wasn't going to be in there. But that was what he chose to do. In that second week, I knew he wasn't in class. It was kind of weird, and I remember leaving class and seeing his truck. Him and his wife and his son lived on campus as well. Alcala lived on campus also. I, of course, lived 30 miles away. And I remember thinking to myself, look at this guy playing hooky. He didn't come to class. He's not even at work. It didn't occur to me. And then that Friday, Alcala and some other friends of ours, we had gone out to eat pizza for lunch, and we got a call. And it was the shop that he worked at. And I knew he had PTSD, but I guess I didn't really know how bad it was. And he had taken his own life in our last semester. We had finally gotten there. I didn't know what was going on at home. I didn't understand. We didn't really talk about a lot of personal stuff when we were at school. It was all about work. And that shook Alcala and me pretty bad. For a long time, we had a really hard time believing they actually did that. We just swore there had to be somebody that came through the window and they did this. We were trying to find reasons, what happened. At that point, I had never really lost anyone close to me like that. of course you lose grandparents and things like that, but we spent every day in class, and he was one of my main cheerleaders. Our agreement was that he would help me in the labs and I would help him with the schoolwork. He struggled more with the book work. I really didn't know what I was going to do at that point. I considered not finishing, honestly. It was hard to go in there and even look at that place every day. But then I was like, we had this dream. We were going to go work, and then we were going to come back, and we were going to be instructors, and we were going to teach the way that we were taught. So it was carry on. My instructor that semester gave me a really hard time. Thanks a lot, Bandy. He would tease me and say that it didn't matter whether I learned to be a technician or not. I was going to be an estimator anyway, and that was another driving force into making sure that never happened. Pretty sure that's probably the goal. I don't know whether it was or not, but whenever I finished, he told me his one bit of advice to me would be, stop being so scared of everything. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. And I'm a perfectionist, so that was pretty good advice. It was actually one of the best bits of advice that I ever got. Hopefully he doesn't hear this and get all big-headed about it. How I started working in the collision industry. I was in my last semester, and we were about 2 months in. I had gone to school with someone that was in my shop management class that had told me about this one dealership, and I saw that they had a job posted for a body helper. I went and applied for the body helper position, but when I got there, it was really funny because he already had my resume pulled up from Indeed, and he had seen all of my administrative history. He didn't want me to be a body helper. He wanted me to be a pre and post scanner. I knew a little bit about scanning and diagnostics. We covered that a little bit in school, but I wasn't really sure about it or about third party. I was like, okay, well, that seems pretty cool. I guess he was trying to take some of it off of the estimators. I also was going to be hourly and just do pretty much whatever I was told to do. It was a great experience. By the time I finished my final semester, I was doing pretty well. I did all kinds of stuff. I actually really used the access that I had to the GM system. Every time I wasn't doing anything, I would sit down on the computer and take classes. I wanted to learn all about GM, get my certifications. I'm always trying to get every certification that I can get because I want all these doors to be opened up. I'd already seen how hard it was to be able to specialize in anything, so I try to be the best that I can at anything that I get into, and you can tell by my stories that I've been in quite a few different things. I've had a lot of jobs, and this is the only thing that I've stuck with for a long time. I love collision. That's how dedicated I am to it. I've never devoted any kind of years to anything else like I have to collision. But I learned all about GM, and I would go in there and I'd beg my boss. And thankfully I had a boss that if I asked him enough, he would give me chances on stuff, and I was trying to prove that I was capable of doing this. So he did. He got us a GM scanner, and then we got an FCA scanner, and I was learning pretty much from all my classes and just exploring the system on how to calibrate things, program modules. I did a lot of the ADAS calibrations, initializations after the accident. He also, I don't know if you know what the matrix wand is, but I think they did the training on that like a month after I started working there, and nobody else was interested in learning it. I love that thing. It makes me really sad that they're not going to carry it on and they're not going to update the software, because if you know how to use it, it's a really good tool. I got really spoiled to that when I went back and I was a measuring teacher. I really missed it. There's not as much setup, and you could it was portable. You could carry it. You could measure anything. So since I did all of the diagnostics, I was also doing the measuring to make sure that the brackets for the actual sensors and radar and LiDAR and different detectors got put back in the same place they were supposed to be. Because if they weren't, it was harder for me to calibrate it the way they were supposed to. I really liked it. I loved the dynamic calibrations. I got a little bit of a thrill of going out there and getting to speed down the highway and try to set the adaptive cruise control, and you'd have to have things around you to be able to bounce the sound waves off. I had a lot of fun with that. At the same time, while I was hourly, he would have me do all these other things. I was a little bit older than most new technicians are. I was 33 with 2 kids. I wasn't an 18-year-old, so he would trust me with doing stuff. I got the special vehicles that needed to be really taken care of. I don't really remember. I think it was that he wanted me to do the vehicle tracking system. And that's how I got into the production management. I did blueprinting. The car came to me when it got there. The estimator would do the initial estimate. I was doing tear down and reassembly. Anything I could get my hands on, I wanted to try to learn as much as I could. So I'd tear down the vehicle. The tech would come over there. We'd make the original, I'm saying the words wrong. My brain's not functioning properly. We would do the blueprint and make the supplement. We always try to aim for only one supplement if we had to have a supplement. And once it finished with me, that's when I'd spend my time. I'd come in the morning and I'd get the production tracking list. At the end of the day, I updated cars all day. I was always running around. I wanted to help every technician that I could. What do you need? Oh, can you go check where my parts are at? Oh, can you see if this is done in paint? The quicker the car got through the process, it started with me and it ended with me. And so the quicker it got through, the easier it was for me to do the rest of my job. In the beginning when I was hourly, that's all I cared about was getting the car back so that I could finish the car. I take a lot of pride in the fact that we repaired the vehicle as a team and made it safe for the customer to get back. I could sleep at night and know that they were going to be safe if they were ever in another accident. I think that's another thing that they don't stress about this job. It is important. And I try to stress that to my students all the time. You know, a lot of those 4-year degrees, they'll push about how you're making a difference. You're doing this. We make a difference. If we don't repair something properly, then there's a lot to be taken care of from that. I mean, John Eagle can tell you about that. Look at the John Eagle State Farm Severshawn case. It's important what we do. I take a lot of pride in that. And so that's another thing I try to pass on to my students. If something was missed, I always try to make sure that it was taken care of. I loved working with other technicians. I loved helping them and making sure that they were happy and that their job was easier, and that if I couldn't make everybody else do their job, I was happy to pick up the slack. That was a big part of my role. And the only thing I wasn't happy about at the time was that I was still hourly. He had given me raises, but I wanted to be a technician. I was a technician. I was doing a lot of electrical work, and I wanted to be able to do flat rate. I had never gotten that opportunity before. The only thing close, I would say, is getting tipped as a bartender or a waitress. That was the only time I was ever to control. I place a lot of emphasis on the fact that we can earn what we're worth. I think that's another big asset to what we do. And I had actually competed in the skills competition for the second time. I had done it my second semester as repair. That did not go well. I was actually the first Texas winner for the damage analysis competition. I went to nationals. I did that summer. And when I went away, I just kept thinking about it on that long bus ride because our flight got messed up. I remember thinking, okay, I'm going to come back, and if I'm not going to be a technician, then I'm going to find somewhere else to go. I had tried again to be a body helper whenever those positions opened up. It was It was my goal. I wanted to be a technician. So whenever I got back, I talked to him about it, and I was basically like, okay, well, if we're not going to make this happen, then I'm going to go work somewhere else. I guess he valued what I did, so we talked about it, and that's where I learned about the structures of the pay scales and how those can work. I also earned my ICAR certifications. He kind of showed me something. I was like, is there any way that I couldn't afford to buy my welding certification, my ICAR certifications when I graduated? I was fixing to have to start paying a lot of student loan debt back. I just didn't have the money for it. So he had put me on a contract that if I gave him so many months, that he would pay for my ICAR certifications. That worked out great. I ended up being there longer than that. All of these things are things strategies I plan on bringing into the business, and I've had more time as an educator to think about it. Before I went to Skills, I had seen that there was a position open as an instructor at my old school. I did not want to go into it that early. I wanted to be a technician for longer, but all of my instructors had been there forever, and I did not know if there was going to be another position open for a long time. I went ahead and applied for it, and an estimator at the shop I worked at, he also applied. I didn't know that, but he got the job, and at first I was kind of upset that I got passed over, but then I was like, he has a lot more experience. He had been in the industry for over 10 years or something, I think. So he got that job. We made my pay structure when Dennis agreed to let me become a technician. We worked on a pay structure. He was like, I don't want you to stop doing these other things, the production management. I was like, okay. So every week I would record my hours. He would record my hours, and then we meet up on Friday, and I might miss something, he might miss something, and they would make sure, and I had a different rate for whether I was doing body, whether I was doing mechanical, or whether I was doing my production management. And so that kind of proved to me how we can work a salary and the flat rate. I watched it work. I saw it every week. And I really enjoyed being able to earn more. The only problem with that was the fact that estimators would threaten to turn the alarm on me and lock me in at night because I didn't want to leave. I had a really hard time breaking myself loose from finishing the cars. I wanted to get them done, and I wanted to be ready for the next cars to come in. So that was one of the struggles with it. It was interfering with my home life because I was just too ambitious. I was on the way back from a sublet one day, and that's another thing I did. I ran parts. I picked up parts. I went and dropped off sublets, picked up sublets, made sure that they were taken care of, made sure that alignments got taken care of. I pretty much, the estimators would make sure that those things got set up, but I would go to the estimate. I'd be like, oh, well, this car is having this done. It has this sensor. It's going to have this different thing. I made them a list of, this was back before we had it in the estimating system. I was doing this back in the old school. We didn't have all this in the estimating system. There were no set times. I was having to come up with times. So I would go and I would tell them, okay, well, we're going to be taking the bumper off. It has this rear view camera, the front view camera. If the windshield got replaced, we'd have to change the alignment, so the ride height, all these different things. I know that's all Spanglish for not everybody, but some people. I had gotten to the point where I was really comfortable in what I was doing. I had just got back from a sublet. I can still remember sitting there in the vehicle, and the old state chair of the department had called me. He had talked to me when I was a student about this co-op he was trying to start. And it had gone through different hands, I think, of people that were trying to start it. He told me that there was a position open for an instructor and wanted to know if I wanted to come apply. And I said, no, I'm at a good place. I don't want to do that. Through some negotiation, talking with my husband and my family, I started to consider it. I decided to go interview. Of course, they all gave me a really hard time because for once I got to be in front of the classroom while they got to answer ask questions. I'm notoriously known for asking a million questions. So they really enjoyed that, and gave me a good hard time about it. And even though I had just started out and I was doing all these exciting things, I didn't know if there was going to be another opportunity that came up. And there's benefits that come with being an instructor and working that aren't available at the shop. Like I had decent insurance at the shop, but it was almost impossible. You think it was hard for me to get out of there at 5 o'clock. Imagine what it was like for me to take a day off. Like, I was the only person that did what I did, and if I could either take the day off and they could do the scanning and things like that, not necessarily the programming and all that, but they could do the scanning, and then I lost my hours. And we had, I don't know how the vacation rate worked. I never took vacation. I was really bad about that, even whenever I had it. I finished my last job and had a lot of vacation to cash out at the end. I was having to use up vacation and sick time. But I took the job, and I got over there. He was telling me about this co-op, and I was really excited about it, but he did not tell me I was going to be a refinishing instructor. It ended up being fine. I had 3 sections of refinishing whenever I started, because of the person that I was taking their place. That's what they were supposed to be teaching. I think I mentioned before about how I am with refinishing, but I actually enjoyed the basic paint class. I like the fundamentals. I love teaching them how to use the spray gun and the different materials and how to read product data sheets. Like I said, I'm all about the information, so I really enjoyed that. And then I started teaching the other fundamental classes, and I would start teaching measuring in the summer because we had a certain amount of hours that we were supposed to meet, and I was a welding instructor for the steel welding class. I loved every minute of it. I loved having my students. I loved being with my hero and mentor every day and getting to question him about stuff. We would get really excited whenever a procedure would change, or I'd see something different, or a new tool came out. And I loved being able to I'd run over there to him a couple of times whenever I'd run across measuring something, and he had been my measuring instructor. So I would go back to him and be like, oh, do you think this is what I'm seeing? Do you think this is the frame condition that we talked about? It's really probably not the best that I got excited about such bad damage, but it was thrilling for me. And within 3 years, we finally got the co-op ready to go. It was called Collision Engineering at that time. It had originally been something pilot program. I don't even remember. It's been so long ago. I couldn't get any students into it. By that time, our class stuff after COVID had gone online. And if you think it's hard to get students to do online work in 15 weeks, try telling them that you're going to give them 8 weeks to do the same work. That was a challenge. And the ones that ended up getting into it, they really found it rewarding. I enjoyed being an apprenticeship teacher because they would go out to the shop. I get to go visit the shop. I got to talk to a lot of people. And then they'd come back, and I'd learn just as much from them as I hope they learned from me. It was a great experience. And in my 5th year, I had gone to the Auto Body Association of Texas trade show, and the wheels just really started turning on this culture thing. And I even spoke about it while I was there, and ended up writing. I didn't write it. I offered advice and gave my opinion for an article called Cultivating a Winning Shop Culture for Texas Automotive with my friend Chastity Sisk. Great writer. And this magazine is actually it's the official publication of the Auto Body Association of Texas. If you are a Texas shop, I don't understand why you wouldn't be a member of this organization. They do great things for us. They get out there and make sure that the legislation is taken care of for our parts to be up to par. Trying to help with a lot of our regulation and things like that. They're a great organization, and the trade show is bomb. Jill Tuggle does a great job of putting that together every year. I enjoy it. I learned so much. The classes, I wish they count for credit for my teaching credits. I've talked to her about that. It was very educational. It really made me start thinking about where I wanted to be, and how we are having these tech shortages. And for my goal to be met, I really think it's important for me to play a bigger part in that. And so I want to highlight everything that is going on in our industry. I want to get younger people excited about what it is that we do. It changed my life. I went from being wayward all these years into my 30s, already had 2 kids and didn't know what I was going to do, had all this debt that I had to pay back for these degrees that did not get me anywhere. And I could have gotten this degree. While I was in school, I had applied for a scholarship from Collision Repair Education Foundation. It paid the rest of my time there. And I had earned it, and my grades had earned it, and it's the simplest thing. And I would try to stress to my students while I was there, all you have to do is write why you want to do this. If I remember correctly, it was like a 1-page essay. Go to a shop, talk to them, ask them questions, turn that in, turn your transcript in, and they usually always award something. All of these resources, I've always, in every job, wanted to make sure that I offered. I give unsolicited advice all the time. That's another one of my things as far as asking questions. Like, that's another thing that I do is give advice even when it's not asked for. It's just who I am. I like to help people. And so I'm hoping that this channel is going to be a really good resource to be able to make that connection between those students and the shops, or those students and a career program. Be able to find a way to pay their tuition without having to go into the debt. I think going through something, your experiences make you feel that much stronger about things. And I don't want them to I stay on my kids. I have a 17-year-old right now, and I keep trying to talk to her about a trade for sure. And I think she's actually gonna do web design or web development, something like that. Don't get all that debt. Don't put yourself in that position. We are needed. We learned in COVID, we are essential. We had to be at work. When everything else was shutting down, we had to go to work, even as an instructor, because we couldn't teach collision online. They still put the material on there like that, but you have to be hands-on and have them in the labs. And it's really shown me a perspective. And so I'm excited about starting this and doing these interviews and being able to bring on the voices. I'll make another video where I go into more about the theme days I'm wanting to do. I want to get involved in advisory boards, advise shops on how to get on advisory boards. Participation is so important, and I plan on making a video about that and about expectations of new technicians, or even if you retain a technician from other places. These are things that need to be stressed. And as far as I know there's a lot of great podcasts in our industry. Mickey Woods being one of them. I really like her, and I like that she has stuff on there. And we have a lot of people that talk about the business end and a lot of the numbers and the KPI and what products to use and things like that, but they don't really talk from an in-shop perspective. And being that that's where my heart is, and how I like to advocate for technicians and students coming into this program, that's where I want to stress my podcast. And I want to broadcast all of the things that are available in our industry and all the opportunities and the different specializations. So yeah, I'm going to make another video where I go more into the business layout of it and what you can expect on certain days. I'm hoping I'll probably start with like 1 to 2 videos a week. Hopefully work up to where it's a 5-day thing. Like I said, I have theme days. If you're still with me at this point, I really appreciate it. It's really hard for me to talk about myself, so I appreciate you sticking around. And if I was fidgety and uncomfortable, sorry about that. I only have to do this one time, and I need to have it as my base video for YouTube. You can always refer back to it or share it if you want with other people. But I think explaining myself would kind of show you how invested I am in this profession and helping your business. I hope that I've achieved that goal today. Please like, share, subscribe to the to the channel, and I'll try to make sure and post on Instagram or the Facebook page for Autobody Tech Experience anytime I drop videos. But if you subscribe to the channel and you set up those notifications, number one, it'll put us in your algorithm, and it'll notify you anytime we have videos dropping. I have some really, really exciting people that I plan on interviewing, so you won't want to miss that. Thank you again for your time, and I hope that you join us again. Have a good one.